Okay, I think I'll get started. There's still a few people joining, but we can begin. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Kapp, and I'm the University Director of Academic Planning and Administration at CUNY Central. I'm also a member of the CUNY Assessment Council. Before we dive in, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. We recommend that you select the speaker view as opposed to the gallery view. So I think for most of you, what you're going to have is the option of having standard and then two side-by-side options under your view. And we recommend side-by-side speaker. So you'll have the speaker and a big view of the slides. We've turned off your microphones, and we ask that you please keep them off throughout the presentation. At the bottom of your screen, you will see the option to use live transcript. So if you want to use subtitles, you can just choose show subtitles. Participation in our polls today is purely optional and anonymous. And we are recording this session. To ask questions, we'd like you to please go to the chat. And at the bottom, you can choose webinar Q&A in the to field. So there's a pull down menu where you see to, and you can actually select webinar Q&A. And that way you'll direct your questions to one person. What we'll do is at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So we'll save your questions until the end. And we hope to get to all of your questions, but it's possible we won't. Okay, today's discussion is about assessment and how we use it to collaborate in support of student success and institutional effectiveness, as well as meeting the standards for accreditation. Specifically, our topics for today are: what is assessment, the importance of collaboration, and the Assessment 101 online course. Up front, I'd like to thank Francesca Teora, the assessment specialist at the Graduate Center, and Melissa Sultana, the Associate Director of Assessment at Baruch. Not only have they contributed to the Assessment 101 course, but they're also managing the technical aspects of today's session. And with that, I'm happy to introduce the two chairs of the CUNY-wide Assessment Council, Janine Moloch. She's the Director of Institutional Research at the School of Professional Studies, and Nazia Naeem, who is the Associate Director of Assessment at York College. And I'd like to turn it over to Janine.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. As Karen stated, Nazia and I are the co-chairs of the CUNY Assessment Council. We are thrilled that you have taken this time out of your busy schedules to be with us today to learn more about assessment generally and Assessment 101 specifically. We are overjoyed that you to share with you this webinar. We are thrilled to share with you today our mission, our role, and introduce you to some of our work, including Assessment 101. This presentation represents the embodiment of the Assessment Council's mission, which is to foster a culture of assessment and evidence-based decision-making within the CUNY community and among its constituent colleagues. And we do this by identifying, developing, and communicating best practices in the assessment. We strive today for this presentation to fulfill our mission. For those of you who may be unaware, the CUNY Assessment Council is composed of assessment colleagues on every campus. We recognize that there are structural differences across the CUNY campuses, and that in some cases, assessment responsibilities are assigned to overlap with institutional research, institutional effectiveness, and/or specific faculty roles, such as program directors. Every campus, however, generally has at least one colleague with specific assessment experience, and those colleagues typically serve on the council, and they are the contact person on each campus. So who are we? The members of the Assessment Council are the appointed leaders of assessment from each college. This includes those whose work involves overseeing, managing, or actively participating in institutional effectiveness, assessment, or accreditation activities on their campuses. What is our role? We offer guidelines and provide resources that support assessment activities across CUNY. We provide access to assessment resources and best practices among council membership and with the community, the CUNY community in general. We also provide opportunities to develop and improve awareness of and expertise in assessment across CUNY colleges. Finally, we develop solutions to assessment challenges faced by council members at their respective institutions. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn it over to my co-chair, Nazia Naeem.
Thank you, Janine. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be talking a little bit about the Assessment Council projects and initiatives. In addition to Assessment 101, we also want you to know about Assess at CUNY. Assess at CUNY is a newsletter that serves faculty and staff and students by publishing articles, reviews, reflections, and success stories concerning academic and administrative assessment, evidence-based teaching, program development, implementation, and service delivery. We welcome article submissions from everyone. Please use the link we are now putting in the chat if you're interested in submitting. With that said, the focus of today's presentation is on collaborations around assessment and our most recent project, Assessment 101. It is my great pleasure to introduce the three Assessment 101 project co-chairs who will discuss what assessment is, how collaborations are key to successful assessment, and introduce you to Assessment 101. We have Abigail Morrison from the CUNY School of Professional Studies. We have Erica Carlson, formerly of BMCC. And last but not least, we have Raquel Faster from Queens College. I will now turn it over to Raquel.
Thank you so much, Nazia, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today. It's just lovely that so many of you took time out of your day to be with us, and we're really excited to speak to you about a number of different things. But first of all, the most important thing is that we give our thank yous up front. So we are so indebted and so grateful to several people at CUNY Central, especially the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost, Jose Luis Cruz, for his support and his interest in spreading the word about assessment and institutional effectiveness, and his leadership on this with the presidents and provosts across our system. We also want to thank the entire CUNY Office of Academic Affairs, because they were really instrumental in having this little dream of ours get off the ground. We dreamt this up in June 2018. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. But it was the CUNY Office of Academic Affairs that actually gave us a grant money in order to hire a professional instructional designer. All of the work that the Assessment Council did on this was completely voluntary, so their money literally just went to expertise that we did not have. We particularly want to thank our amazing CUNY Office of Academic Affairs liaison, Karen Kapp, who you met earlier in this presentation. She has been instrumental in the success, cohesion, and forward movement of the Assessment Council over the last several years. We also want to thank our colleagues from the CUNY Office of Computing and Information Services, particularly Chandra Cherry and Anastasia Fatih, who helped us in basically getting Assessment 101 into public hands, into everyone at CUNY's hands through the Blackboard site. And we want to thank our CIS colleagues, Mike Mueller and John Jenna, for their guidance and assistance in making today's webinar happen. We appreciate all of you at Central and across the system. So the last people we want to thank, just again, up front, is all of the members of the Assessment Council who actually participated on the Assessment 101 team and made this happen. Their names are listed here. I timed it. It would take me probably a good 5 minutes to read everyone's names, so I apologize. We will send this information out later if you wish to have it, and we just want to thank everyone profusely. This was a collaborative effort, and we could not have done it without you, so thank you, and I'm saying this on behalf of my fellow co-chairs, Abby Morrison and Erica Carlson. So today we want to talk to you a little bit about, basically how can we effectively support students, faculty, and staff? And the thrust of today's discussion is about through assessment and collaboration. I do want to note that this webinar is not a demo of the Assessment 101 course. That is a course that looks and feels completely different from this presentation. It is not a PowerPoint. It's actually a beautiful, and we hope we hope you think beautiful, and we hope you think highly engaging online course. What we're doing today is just introducing the idea of assessment and collaboration to you, and kind of helping you think through whether Assessment 101 would be good for you. And certainly for those of you in the audience, and I know there are many who have a little more experience with assessment, we urge you to take this opportunity to be introduced to Assessment 101 and share it with your colleagues, your faculty and staff. So now let's talk a little bit about assessment. Assessment basically answers the question, how am I doing? And some people who work in higher ed, when you talk to them assessment, they're like, oh, I've never done it before. But the fact is, we've all done it before in our day-to-day lives. So for example, these little, if you can see the pictures on the screen, I will describe them for you. One is a pair of feet standing on a scale looking down at the person's weight. One is of a male doctor holding a stethoscope, and one is of a person holding a blood pressure monitor. And these are three types of examples that many of us are familiar with in our lives about, ways we can answer the question, how are we doing? So we can take these measurements at certain points in time, again, our weight, our blood pressure, and we can also track it longitudinally to see if we can identify trends or changes. So this is just a way for us to really make clear that assessment is really not that complicated or scary. And it's something that we do pretty much automatically throughout most of our, certainly on a week-to-week basis, if not a day-to-day basis. But let's talk about assessment in terms of higher education. Within the context of higher education, assessment is specifically the systematic collection, review, and use of information about academic programs and administrative and educational support services undertaken for the purpose of improving student outcomes and institutional effectiveness. Now, some of you may say, well, I know I do this. And the truth is that, again, even higher ed assessment, many of you do sort of informally. You might do it in conversations in an academic department meeting about, hey, how did our students do? Do we think that that prerequisite works for this class? You engage in a lot of informal assessment, and we're very confident that you do. What we're trying to encourage today is more intentional and documented assessment, and that's what we would refer to as more formal assessment. We just want to also clarify that assessment is not a tool for doing individual performance evaluations. It is not a tool meant to evaluate a faculty member in terms of their promotion and tenure process or anything like that. It's not a tool meant to evaluate any individual administrator in terms of their annual performance review. So please, let's just be clear when we learn and when we speak with our colleagues about that is not assessment. That's an HR function, it's a managerial function, and that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is a tool that will help us understand in aggregate. So how are students learning in the Department of Biology as a whole? How are students improving their career readiness through the programs and offerings of the Career Center as a whole, okay? So right now, what we'd like to do is take a quick poll, and it's totally optional. You should be able to, when the poll comes up on your screen, which it should momentarily, you should be able to just select any of these answers. At work, how often do you engage in assessment? We'll give you about a minute or so to respond. Your possible choices are constantly, occasionally, never, and only when I'm asked to. And I guess we should have had some fun waiting music like they have in game shows, but you can pretend that it's playing. So looks like people are almost tied or very neck and neck between constantly and occasionally. And I'm not surprised because, as I mentioned before, many of us do this informally and intuitively, and that's great. And we're very excited. Oh, it looks like the poll has closed with a slight margin ahead for constantly. which is maybe good and maybe bad. We will take that as a compliment on Assessment Council. And we're excited to hear that. For those of you who answered only when I've asked to, you have our full sympathies. We understand that sometimes it can feel like something that, is not intuitive to you or maybe is outside of your general scope of interest, but we're hoping to convince everyone, no matter how they responded, about the benefits and values of assessment and collaboration. So let's talk about why we engage in assessment. And if we could if we can, okay, the poll is gone. Let's talk about why we engage in assessment. So assessment is really an opportunity to pause, reflect, and discuss on questions that are really core to everything we do, whether we're faculty members or administrators. What are we trying to accomplish and why? And so if I'm a faculty member, what am I trying to get? What do I want my students to learn? If I'm an administrator, why is this particular program or service going to help our students either understand how to navigate college better, understand how to prepare for their career better, registrar function? Am I going to help students register more easily and understand their academic pathway? How well have we succeeded, and where might improvements be made? So again, intentionality is what separates structured assessment from informal. And so what we'd like to encourage is, as you're moving through your workday and your work week, and as you're meeting with colleagues in your department or in committees, maybe come back to these questions sometimes and see if that is like an opening to have honest discussions with your colleagues about it. We also want to talk about additional benefits to assessment, and these may be resonant for many of you. One is that it helps us articulate and communicate the scope of your department, the need for your department, and the impact of your department. All of you work really hard in many different functions, whether you're faculty, administrator, staff, and assessment is a way to help other people outside of your area understand what it is you do and the impact that it has on students or sometimes on faculty and staff. It can also help you make the case for additional resources. And we do have to acknowledge, even though we don't like to talk about it a lot, that assessment is actually required by all accreditation agencies. So engaging in it helps you to maintain and ensure compliance with all institutional and specialized accreditation. We also want to recognize that we are living in a time of environmental change. Since March 2020, everything that we've done, unless we are in certain roles within our organization, such as buildings and grounds and facilities, and we thank all of the people who have remained on campus throughout the duration of the last year and a half. But for those of us who have been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work from home or work in a mixed mode, we recognize that we are working from home, faculty are teaching from home, tutoring centers are being run from home, so peer-to-peer and expert-led tutoring is being done from home. And everything is happening in a different environment. It's fully online or largely online. And so often we on Assessment Council, our colleagues ask us, but wait, don't I have to do something differently? How can I assess student learning? It's not the same as last year when when I taught this class face-to-face. And the bottom line is assessment is applicable and necessary and done in the same way, regardless of the context. So if you have student learning outcomes that you developed 5 years ago in the Department of English, you're still going to assess whether students attain those student learning outcomes, whether they learned it in face-to-face or online. The only difference that you may want to incorporate additionally, not instead of, into your assessment is the effect or the impact of the modality, of the delivery modality. And likewise, you might want to assess student satisfaction with that. That can help sort of broaden the context. But essentially, environmental changes do not change the principles and the methods of assessment, which are applicable no matter what environment you're in. Now we're going to do another quick poll, and we want to ask you about which population do you wish you knew more in order to facilitate your work. So is there a group on your college campus who you wish you knew slightly more about so that it would help you either provide programs and services better or interact better? And again, we'll give you a minute here. Students are coming out ahead, which pretty much makes sense since we all work with them directly or indirectly in some way. But I'm glad that other people are also recognizing that perhaps for their work, they need to know more about faculty or staff, alumni in many cases, employers and donors. And it looks as though nearly a quarter of us are responding all of the above. And that can certainly make sense as well. Many of our departments are cross-cutting. The truth is that there are no wrong answers here. You and your colleagues will have reason to learn more about almost all of these populations at different points in your work. And that is, based on the nature of your specific work. It's part of the reason why, in terms of partners on assessment, information services and information technology are absolutely our best friends, because they are the department that is really facilitating our ability to capture, analyze, and disseminate data and information. So they're really the unsung heroes and always and forever partners of assessment. So we see that students have come out ahead, and that makes a lot of sense. And this is, again, just to encourage you that to recognize that assessment is not just limited to understanding more about students and their learning. Assessment can be done about all of the different populations, mixed populations. It can be done about administrative, educational, and student support units. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Eric Carlson, who will help you learn more about the different types of assessment.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Raquel. In order to get started with assessment, we first need to know what we want to assess. Well, the question, are students learning, can only be answered if we first establish what it is we expect students to learn. Similarly, we can only determine if our services and processes are working well if we first define what success looks like. So we need to identify our goals and intended outcomes, but what is a goal and what is an outcome, right? A goal is what we want to achieve, what you want to achieve, but really that's a broad idea, the broad idea. What is actually measured are outcomes. Outcomes are ways of stating what we expect will happen. For learning outcomes, it's the capabilities, knowledge, skills, and attitudes that should be acquired by the end of a particular assignment, class, course, or program. For administrative and education support services, commonly referred to as AES, as an outcome, it is a result of a service or transaction and/or intended change in the students, participants, customers, or stakeholders interacting with that unit, program, or service. Learning outcomes are established at several levels: course learning outcomes, program learning outcomes, general education learning outcomes, and college-wide or institutional learning outcomes. Regardless of the level, learning outcomes are generally phrased in a way that allows us to articulate for ourselves and to students what they should expect to be able to do after completing a course, a degree program, and/or a particular co-curricular program. For example, upon completion of Introduction to Statistics, students will be able to interpret quantitative representations, such as graphs or formulas. Students must have opportunities to achieve outcomes through learning and applying skills. Students cannot be expected to attain learning outcomes if the curriculum is not intentionally designed to teach the outcomes with embedded assignments that allow students to demonstrate that they have learned these skills. For example, if there's a learning outcome for interpreting data, but there isn't an assignment or activity around doing so, we cannot expect students to be able to demonstrate that they've achieved the outcome. We also want to define our outcomes for our administrative and educational support areas. Similar to learning outcomes, these AES outcomes can be developed at several levels, which can be services, initiatives, and processes within a unit, across multiple units, or across the college. This may include the following: support outcomes related to services or processes. For example, students will identify and set academic goals when they start at their first semester, at the start of the semester. This may also include administrative outcomes based on processes and services. For example, the number of admitted students who enroll will increase year over year, or increase the proportion of BIPOC faculty recruited and retained in STEM fields. Or finally, student learning outcomes as a result of participating in a co-curricular program or service. For example, students participating in career advising appointments will demonstrate increased levels of competencies related to the subject for which they sought support. But the best way to do assessment is by collaborating. It is essential to be able to have open and honest discussions among and between faculty, staff, and senior leadership. Every CUNY campus has a person or a team of people designated for the interrelated work of assessment, institutional research, planning, and institutional effectiveness. Get to know these colleagues who are involved in these areas, as they may be able to collaborate with you on assessment. Some good additional partners on assessment include academic department chairs, your Center for Teaching and Learning, any directors of your own administrative, educational, and student support units. They're often interested in learning more about various populations on campus. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Abby to introduce you to how we collaborated to create Assessment 101. Abby?
Thanks, Erica. So now that we've given you the first step of starting the assessment process and you are completely convinced about the need for assessment, we are thrilled to spend a few more minutes telling you about Assessment 101 and how we collaborated to bring it to the CUNY community. The topics discussed so far and much more are covered in this course. But why did we create it? One of the many topics discussed by the CUNY Assessment Council is the collective challenge we have. We know assessment is critical. Each member of the council works to create meaningful ways to engage with their college community around assessment, but we all have limited time and resources. In short, we are seeking to provide the basics of assessment in an engaging, easy to access format available to each of our colleges. This was also important because even though many of you are familiar with assessment and you do it and it's maturing over the years, there are always new people who come on board or people who have not been involved in it. And instead of having to go through the whole process over again with new staff, we can provide this course to give them the basic framework of how to talk about assessment. So the solution is we collaborated to develop a free online course for the entire CUNY community, which is how we planted the seed of Assessment 101. First, I want to talk about our guiding principle, which was simply, or not so simply, to distill and simplify assessment terminology and processes into relevant, easily digestible content that participants can use immediately. If, like me, you might have searched on the internet for how to do assessment, and you might have come into some useful information, but oftentimes it's overwhelming. Every college does it differently. And more often than not, what you see is something that's a bit more mature, not how do we get started. I remember when I first started doing this, I went to a conference and I don't know what they were speaking about, but it certainly wasn't something I was ready to jump into. And so I kept seeking ways to figure out how to simplify and just get started, which is one of the things that the Assessment Council helped to do. And that's what we do for each other. So simplifying it and making it as easy to use as possible was our guiding principle. But we also had some other requirements for the course that would make it easy to use. One is accessible and free for the CUNY community, asynchronous and self-paced. And in fact, the course takes about 60 to 90 minutes to complete. It would introduce the principles of assessment in higher education, provide examples of meaningful and practical benefits of assessment, and provide the language and tools for everyone to be part of the assessment conversation. But how did we do this? And that brings us back to collaboration. Now, I'm not going to bore you with what happened over the 2 years that it took to bring this course to fruition, keeping in mind that part of that 2 years included the transition to remote work, and we did put up a pause on some of our work. But we decided very early on that we were going to work on this as a team, the full Assessment Council. And so we divided ourselves into teams. We had the project management team, whom you've met here. We divided, people volunteered to be curriculum developers, and each team took on a specific topic. We, as we mentioned earlier, hired an instructional designer to help us actually put all this stuff into something that looks and feels nice. Other members were testers. We had a long process of testing, revising, repeat. Marketing, which actually is one of the reasons that brought you all here today, because we had our marketing team. And then, as Rachel mentioned earlier, tech support from CIS. So we developed a project scope, which is what enabled us to have central office provide funding. We developed the curriculum, which was an intense and iterative process. We had to constantly remind ourselves that this was 101, not a complete dissertation on how to conduct assessment. We had, we won't show it to you, but the starting outline, really long. And then the final outline, which you'll see next, took months of constant going back and forth and constantly trying to distill that content into smaller pieces. We had to build the course, and then again, test, revise, and repeat. And then finally, it officially launched last November. And I'm happy to say that there are lots of people who have taken it. And so far, the feedback's been pretty positive. So here's what's covered. I'm not going to read each one, but we believe that these 8 areas, I think, and there's a conclusion, these will take you through the steps of how to think about and how to structure assessment in your mind. So no more worrying, well, what do I do first and what do I do second? This course can help you put those pieces in place in a little bit more of a linear process than I think some of us are used to seeing out in the bigger world. So with this, is it on the next one? Oh, we invite you to take it. Consider this your formal invitation to do so. It is easily accessible through Blackboard using your CUNY First credentials. And instructions for enrolling in the site can be found on our Assessment Council website. And I believe that the link will also be put into the chat. And of course, contact your assessment professional at your campus if you're not clear on how to access the course. So at this point, this is the end of our formal presentation, and we would love to hear what questions you have. As a reminder, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat using the webinar Q&A person, and we'll get started with questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby. So Melissa, do we have any questions at this point?
I don't see any questions
Okay, well then.
yet. I'm scrolling down.
That's okay. That's okay. So
Sorry.
No, go for it, Fran.
I have a question. Someone would like to know if they provide faculty support but are not faculty, can they still take the course?
Thank you. That is a great question. Every single person who works at CUNY, whether you are a faculty member, a support member to a faculty member, an administrator, every single person is welcome and can access this. All you need is your CUNY First username and password to log on to the Blackboard site. It is 100% free. We were committed to developing a 100% free resource that was accessible to everyone.
I have a question. When is the last day to apply for the Assessment 101 online course?
I can answer. Never. It's open. I mean, I don't think we're ever shutting it down. In fact, maybe one day we'll do 201. But no, in reality, you don't have to apply. You simply self-register and you enroll.
I love the fact that Abby just said maybe one day there'll be a 201, because I just got a question that says you mentioned that it took a lot of paring down to get it to Assessment 101. Will there be Assessment 102? So in fact, members of our audience have that same question. I will start the answer, and I will welcome my colleagues joining in as well. We recognize the strong need for Assessment 102, that many of us have at least a good introductory grasp, and we've done it. Maybe we've done it for a few years, but we want to kind of strengthen and build. The answer is we certainly have a lot of material that was pared down, and we certainly have a strong interest. And so if there is an opportunity to have resources allocated to us, as there were last time, in order to get the instructional design support, I'm sure that we can figure out a way over time, not right away, to make it happen. In the meantime, what I would recommend is reaching out to the assessment professionals on your campus. They or their Center for Teaching and Learning colleagues on your campus generally are the people who can and do provide professional development on assessment. But I know that there's a strong interest on all of our parts on having this be an initial conversation with everyone. We'd love to, continue the conversation as appropriate, and we will certainly be open to the idea of, if not as structured as Assessment 101, certainly maybe workshops moving forward in the future. That's something that we've talked about a lot in CUNY Assessment Council. And if any of my colleagues want to add to that, please do it. Do so.
I just want to piggyback off of Raquel to say that one of the things we try to emphasize, and we hope that we got across successfully in today's presentation, is how assessment requires a collaborative process. And so we recognize that the Assessment 101 is the introductory. And as Raquel said, should resources become available, it's something that we would definitely consider. But a lot of questions you may have, we encourage you to go to your assessment council colleagues on your campus. A lot of the times, some of the things that drive the agenda are challenges that our colleagues have faced at various campuses. And then we try to pull together to see what kind of resources they have used or are available to address some of the questions that have arisen. So again, just wanted to remind you all to utilize the context on your campuses.
Okay, panelists, we have another question. We have several. So the next one is, if we complete the course, can we still go back and revisit the information, or will it close to us?
You should be able to go back.
I did check. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I did confirm.
Yeah,
I
I'm
did
only
confirm.
hesitating because there's all of you are familiar with Blackboard, so I don't need to.
I did
that's-
confirm. You can go back and,
Yes.
and retake the module again.
Can graduate students take the course?
Yes, again, all you need is your CUNY login. I don't know if students have taken it, but if you know of any students that are trying to, and if there's any glitches, then again, reach out to your assessment council person on your campus, and we'll do whatever we need to do to make sure that they have access. But theoretically, if you have access to Blackboard, you have access to this course.
Right. And just to clarify, if you have an issue with accessing Blackboard, that should go to your help desk on your campus. But if you have questions about Assessment 101, specifically the content or assessment in general, then please speak to the assessment expert on your campus. And yes, again, it is open to everyone, students as well. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. We encourage participation. And if you have staff, for example, that you feel might benefit, and we strongly feel that all of your staff might benefit, please just feel free to invite them to do it. Every person who completes the course, and again, the entire course, all of the 8 modules in total is 90 minutes to 2 hours, and it can be done self-paced. It doesn't have to be done all at once. And everyone who completes it will get a certificate of completion. So we've tried to make it as accessible and user-friendly as possible.
Another question is, what were some of the feedback or responses you received from those who completed Assessment 101?
Good question. So mostly the good comments were that it was distilled to things that were easily digestible, easily usable. I think some of the other comments were more about what comes next, and what more can we do. But that's been the initial feedback, was that it was very engaging and easy to navigate, and that the concepts and definitions were understood, easily absorbed, and people felt comfortable now engaging more in the conversation. I also would like to add, because this has been asked a couple of times, many times. So the way Blackboard is structured with these types of courses, we at the Assessment Council, we're not able to produce a roster of who's taking it at your campus. There's things beyond my knowledge about CIS stuff that for that, but we are not able to provide rosters of who on your campus has actually taken the course. yet again, something else to talk to your assessment council representative about ways in which maybe you want to encourage tracking. You do get a certificate at the end, which we encourage you all to print it out so that you can, share with the supervisor or whoever it is that you've completed the course.
And for those of you who are either 6 years away, 4 years away, or 2 years away from your middle state self-study, we encourage everyone who has any interest and or have been voluntold that they're working on accreditation, everyone, and this is basically everyone on this call, because at some point we have to engage in accreditation work to take the course. Even if you feel like, oh, I already know this, I used to do assessment, or yeah, I've done a little bit of assessment. In the worst case, it's a refresher. You can totally close out of it after 10 minutes if you feel like it's, already stuff that you know. In the best case, it's either brand new information that'll be helpful to you, again, no matter what your role is, or just a review. And then once you review, it might even be a good idea to agree with some colleagues to do it within a certain time period and then get together and talk about it. That's another way to use it. But certainly accreditation is one of the important drivers. It's certainly not the only driver of assessment, but it's important, and we do acknowledge it. And as much as we always like to, we like to encourage people to focus on why it's important, for our own, to support students. And it's true, it's important also for the reasons that we want students to learn, but it is an accreditation requirement. And so we encourage you, no matter where you are in your accreditation cycle, it's a good refresher, or we hope it will be for you.
Our next question begins with, all department chairs should take the course. Will the course be advertised at the new chair orientation? So I can actually take this one or start it, as I worked on the marketing team for Assessment 101. So we do have multiple flyers for individuals across the CUNY campuses to promote and make individual staff units aware of the resource that is Assessment 101. It has been distributed throughout, but it is, as marketing always is, a continuous process because we want to always ensure that people are aware of this valuable resource. So I'm happy to reach out after and provide individuals with that flyer, or if you need to contact us, you can always send the email. I think you have Fran's email, and we can always send you materials to distribute across your campus.
And as far as new faculty orientation, we love that idea. Talk to your associate provost or whoever does programming for your new faculty orientation. That is a phenomenal idea. I can tell you that at least so I'm now at Queens College, the interim dean of institutional effectiveness. But when up until 2 months ago, I was at Baruch, and assessment was included in new faculty orientation because that is a high priority of the associate provost and the provost at Baruch. And so if you're not yet part of orientation, you as the assessment professional should be. And in addition, Assessment 101, I think that's a lovely idea for everyone to include that. And also, frankly, onboarding for administrative people, not just faculty. New
Definitely.
Orientation for everyone.
And this is actually a reminder from one of our Assessment Council colleagues that everyone who engages in the course should remember to click enroll. Otherwise, they'll have to start over from the beginning if they don't complete in a single sitting. Sorry. So just remember to click enroll. Let's see.
Okay, are there any further questions?
We're looking, let's see.
As Melissa looks for additional questions, I just want to take this opportunity to again remind you, which is in the chat, in addition to Assessment 101, we are looking for contributions to our Assess at CUNY newsletter. So please consider that. We definitely welcome all articles related to assessment, work that you've done, presentations that you may have compiled some notes for. So please, any readings as well, consider contributing to the newsletter. Thank you.
I have a couple questions here from folks who are curious in terms of the course. Is it meant for developing assessment for individual courses? Is it going to assist in developing course assessment? Is it gen ed? What exactly can folks expect?
That is a great question. So it focuses on what assessment is in the beginning, but there are tools along the way to help you think about how to structure learning outcomes, how that fits into what we call a curricular map, and how you align everything from your mission all the way through to your course outcomes, how those things align up. And then there are some tools for how to think about developing your assessment plan and who's going to be involved and how are you going to get it done. So it really does take you through some of the ABCs of the assessment process.
And the principles are applicable at every level. So the principles that you'll learn on an introductory basis in Assessment 101 are applicable at the course level, the degree program level, the institutional learning outcomes level. Similarly, on the administrative side, assessment principles are applicable whether you're assessing a particular program, for example, in student affairs, or you want to assess the entire career services department's efforts, et cetera. The basic principles are scalable, absolutely.
Folks would also like to know if the very good templates provided in the Assessment 101 course are downloadable or available somewhere for them for folks to use, such as the sample assessment plan.
Thank you. Yes, well, yes and no. I mean, you can't download it from there, but absolutely you can, again, reach out to your assessment person. We share resources all the time. So if there is a particular thing or things that you want, then your assessment council person can reach out to the rest of us so that we know who actually provided that template and can make it available to the campuses. Yeah. And in fact, some of those, we're starting to work on other things as well on our website, which is building a repository of these types of materials. So that kind of feedback is really helpful and can help us help drive how we can improve the things that we make publicly available elsewhere.
I have another question. So we have an individual asking how we will assess this webinar program.
We love that question, and I'm going to take this. Fear not. Pretty much we're all very much interested in assessing everything we do. It's too much to the dismay of people who know us and love us. So I will be sending out a survey, a brief, very, very brief survey, because we are interested in learning from you about what interested you, if there are topics that are of interest. And kind of, as I said, we want this to be the beginning of an ongoing conversation. I know that all of us on Assessment Council do. I also serve as the co-chair of the CUNY Middle States Council, and several of us are on the CUNY Institutional Research Council, and we recognize the need for more system-wide information. So with you're welcome to opt in. It'll be a very short survey coming at you probably early next week.
Scrolling down, looking. Is this course relevant to all accreditation or accrediting agencies?
Yes. I think Rochelle mentioned this earlier, but the principles of assessment are the same across everything. You want to develop what your outcomes are. You want to develop how you're going to measure them. You want to then measure them. And then you want to think about what you're going to do with those outcomes. And that is applicable everywhere. And as my assessment colleagues like to remind me, it's applicable to your daily life. We have a lot of fun joking around about how it's applicable to weight loss and cooking and everything else you do. But yes, this is applicable across all disciplines at all levels and across both academic and non-academic areas of higher ed.
And the truth is that every single institutional accreditor and every single specialized accreditor, at least in the United States, has not just a few, but many, many, many requirements around assessment. In fact, you could almost say that assessment is the #1 common factor across all accreditation agencies. They want to know that students are learning. They want to know that we're using resources effectively. They want to know that we're operating our institutions with ethics and integrity. And they want to know that our work is being framed by mission and goals. So absolutely, yes.
Rolling through the chat, just want to ensure we don't miss any additional questions.
I'd like to address a question that just came through to me directly. So somebody asked, why not provide the resources from the course through Blackboard rather than asking your council rep for them? I apologize if we miscommunicated in any way. Every one of you on this call and all of our CUNY colleagues have direct access to the course. You do not need to go through your assessment council rep for anything other than if you are inspired to have a further conversation with them about assessment. You have direct access to the course, and all of the information in the course is directly accessible via Blackboard. And I will go ahead and once again, give me a second and I will put that link in the chat as well. And in the meantime, if there are any other questions.
We do have another question. Is there any way to know how many individuals engaged in Assessment 101 over time so that we can measure whether individuals are participating, if the enrollment is increasing, perhaps by institution?
So to answer the first question, yes, we can see enrollment through the Blackboard Grade Center, but we can't divide it by institution. Again, we've been working with CIS, and there isn't really a way for us to print rosters or have that done at the institution level. That said, I would be happy to, if anyone knows of a way that actually can be done, I'd love to figure that out. But according to the folks at CIS, that isn't an option in the way that this course has been set up with self-enrollment.
Panelists, here's another. Do you think you might offer an official 4-credit class someday?
Oh, I love that idea. Several of us have been adjunct professors and we love teaching. It's a great thought. We'll certainly think about if that would be possible, if there would be a way for us to do that. Certainly, I think it would be fun for us to do and hopefully useful for many people. But I will take this opportunity as a former alumna of the Baruch Masters in Higher Education Administration program to let you know that you can take courses for credit on assessment and other related topics through Baruch College. Mark School of International and Public Affairs has a master's degree in higher ed administration. Again, I'm a proud alumna and a former adjunct faculty member there. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? It looks like we're coming up on close time. Abby, Erica, Melissa, Janine, Nazia, Karen, anything you want to add?
Just thank you so much for participating. It's wonderful to see you all. And we're excited that you're excited about assessment. So
yeah,
thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and continue the collaborations among your colleagues at your campuses, those who represent, serve on the council as your reps, and anybody else you meet new people and learn about assessment. And we hope one day as a council we can guide this conversation further, and we can bring together people from across CUNY to share these assessment activities, perhaps in the form of workshops, in-person workshops, or some type of conference where we can actually get to see and engage in the dialogue. So we hope, stay positive on that note, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nazia. Again, as her fellow co-chair, I want to say thank you so much. Thank you to the amazing dream team that put together this webinar. It's been a pleasure to serve you, and it's been a pleasure to engage with you today. So have a great weekend, everyone.